Sick of Elden Ring and being a maidenless lowly tarnished? Looking for something else to play? This year has been pretty barren for game releases, so here is 5+ Souls-like games to play after Elden Ring. Let's go. Let me know in the comments down below anything that you would add to this list or things that you would change, or even if general opinions on these games on this list. We'll start out with Mortal Shell. Mortal Shell draws almost exclusively from the design principles of Dark Souls with a unique twist. You will explore this dark fantasy world while possessing lost warriors shells that will enhance your unique abilities of your combat skills. So some shells will be faster, some shells will be a bit more tankier, and it fits in that kind of Dark Souls general theme with the different shells as well as the different weapons, and it is heavily inspired by Dark Souls. There is also a roguelite mode that was added after launch with a DLC to add a bit more replayability, plus an extra shell and weapon as well. So there's plenty to do in here. It is a relatively short indie game. It's not super long, but there's a lot of really interesting combat, and the harden mechanic where you like harden your shell, you don't really block, you harden yourself to like block, and then you can do it like in the middle of animations as well. So you can harden, block damage, and then like follow up with those damage attacks. It's really cool general flow to the combat and feel of those kind of mechanics in the game that is really unique, and it adds to that Dark Souls principle. It's not just like copying Dark Souls, it's trying to do something a little bit different while really being inspired by the old school, Dark Souls 1 kind of general flow and like combat pacing, I really feel like. But there's a lot to love in Mortal Shell, even if it is a shorter title, and I did cover it a while ago back when it came out, as well as the DLC that it did come out, so I've got some videos on the channel if you want to learn a bit more about Mortal Shell. Next is Dark Souls 3. This is the simplest one on this list, and you can't make a list talking about Souls-like games without mentioning at least one Dark Souls game on the list, and Dark Souls 3 was the last Dark Souls that From Software made before Elden Ring, and the combat has very similar feelings to Elden Ring. A lot of the core principles from Elden Ring really came from Dark Souls 3 in terms of even its animations, but in terms of the weapon skills and general style and way that you use weapons, it's all changed and like developed to really succeed in Elden Ring and push it a little bit further, but all of those principles came from Dark Souls 3. It's that dark fantasy setting that we all know and love from these FromSoft games, punishing combat, complex narrative structures of talking to random people and have no idea what they're talking about, and of course poisonous swaps. It's all here in Dark Souls 3, and it's absolutely worth checking out. I'm actually in the process of playing this currently for the second time, really. Like, I never actually finished Dark Souls 3, I'm ashamed to admit, when it first came out. I don't know why I moved on to something else, but I'm trying to actually get through it and finish it now and kind of fill that void after finishing Elden Ring for, I don't know, a million times. Ashen is next. Now, this is a brilliant indie action RPG inspired by Dark Souls, like all things on this list, but Ashen features a vast open world to explore in their unique art style, where the characters have that kind of like pastel like art style look. I don't know how you really describe it, but your character will be followed by an AI companion as you set out on your journey to bring light back to the world. It's filled with creatures and bosses to kill and all that good stuff. The story in Ashen, I think, is really underrated. I think the story and the world that they've created here is really strong. A lot of these indie Souls-like games, Mortal Shell kind of included to some regard, don't have a strong story. It's just kind of like a dark fantasy setting, and then there's like bosses to kill, and you're just like some dude and you just go out and kill them. But Ashen has a really good lore and story, and the characters are all very well thought out. They all have their own objectives. The AI companions will follow you, and you can complete quests for them, as well as advancing the town that you start in. There's a lot to love in Ashen. I really like the game and the way that it works with light and the different mechanics and plenty of different weapons to try. And you can also play the game entirely in co-op, which is worth pointing out. So someone can actually control your AI companion, so you can actually co-op with a friend if you did want to do that as well. Plenty of fun to be had in Ashen, and absolutely worth checking out. Next is Hollow Knight. Now, if you're looking for something different, Hollow Knight is a charming 2D side-scroller action RPG. This is an Australian-made game, so credit to the Aussies like myself. This beautiful game features many of the systems and mechanics that you'd expect from like a Souls-like kind of game, the punishing combat, the tough boss encounters, but it is in that like 2D side-scrolling kind of aspect, and that's why I wanted to call it out on this list. Something a little different, right? We've just gone through 3 games that are different, but they function very similarly into the same way, whereas Hollow Knight is completely different. It is a 2D side scroller with a lot of those traditional kind of mechanics and upgrade paths and things that you would expect, and it is well loved by tons of people. It's an extremely well loved game. If you haven't checked it out, it's absolutely worth doing so. It's on like basically every platform, I believe. I think it's even on Switch as well, so there's plenty of different ways you could could pick up Hollow Knight. And Silk Song should probably be coming out next year. The sequel / DLC, whatever they've decided to call this thing, should probably be coming out next year. So absolutely well worth checking out. Now, before we get on to number one, I want to go through some honorable mentions. There's 3 of these bad boys that I want to talk about. First is the Demon Souls PS5 remake. Now, I considered putting this on this list instead of like Dark Souls 3 or even instead of something else, but PS5s like don't exist still. Like it's been like 2 years since they've been out and you still can't get them. And I felt a little bit wrong putting an exclusive on this list that is on a console that like no one can get. So it didn't make the list, but Demon Souls is absolutely worth checking out if you do have a PS5. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order is a fantastic Star Wars game, but it's also a very loose Souls-like. It follows those same like Dark Souls-like principles, but with a Star Wars feel to it. Cal is a fantastic character, and BD, the little droid that follows him around, absolutely perfect. Well worth checking out. Great world, as it's Star Wars obviously, but the combat here is also really strong. The Neo series is our last honorable mention. Now, I could have put this on this list, to be honest, but I am ashamed to admit that I've never played the Neo games. But I hear that they are really good and everyone loves them, and it's on my list of things to check out, and I absolutely will eventually one day, who knows. It'll sometime, I'm sure it'll happen, but the Neo games, absolutely you should check out. I can't tell you much about them because I haven't played them, but I know people really like them, so go and check those out. All right, now number one on this list is Elden Ring. Just go play Elden Ring again, man. Make a new build. No, I'm kidding. All right, don't. You could do that, but the number one game on this list is Dragon's Dogma. Now, I wanted to put this on the list because it is not a Souls-like game, but it fits a lot of the similar systems that you come to expect. Now, the general mechanic of, Souls and like leveling up through that's not in Dragon's Dogma, but fighting big bosses with interesting combat mechanics and unique systems are in Dragon's Dogma. Now, you've got these pawns that you can use that you can develop with you, and you always have one standard pawn, but then you get the other ones that you can like pick up. So you've got like a party of people that you carry around, you do quests in like this open world. The game doesn't look great, but if you're on PC, you can mod it to like make it a little bit better, but it is an older game, and Dragon's Dogma 2 was recently announced, which I am absolutely interested in checking out. I'm also doing a playthrough of Dragon's Dogma currently because I want to make a video specifically about Dragon's Dogma and kind of, its evolution over time and just how popular the game still is, like as a cult classic. And I feel that as like an RPG gamer, you kind of have to have checked out Dragon's Dogma and see what makes it special. And it is that pawn system and the grappling and the flexibility of the combat and all the different classes and how they like interwove and like mesh together. It's a really interesting game, and I'm really interested to see what they do with Dragon's Dogma 2 and how they kind of develop those systems further and what they change and stuff. But it's absolutely worth checking out. The Dark Arisen version of the game is available on like literally everything, so go and pick that up. And there's DLC that's added to the game in that as well, and plenty of things to check out there. That is my list. That is all games. We've gone through 8 games, so a little bit more than 5, but there's plenty of things to check out here. Let me know in the comments down below what you think about this list. What would you change? What would you add? Anything that you think that anyone should check out. We can kind of help each other find some interesting games to play together. As a fun fact, it is really hard to play like multiple different Souls-like games back to back, getting footage for a video and like try to remember the different mechanics of all of them all at once. Very hard to do, but thank you for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is NorZZa, and I hope you have a great day.